She lived alone in a small town where life moved slowly, the kind of place where everyone knew each other's name, and news traveled faster than the wind. Her days were simple, waking up early, going to work at a small grocery store, and returning home before sunset. She liked her quiet life, and after a few difficult years, she had learned to enjoy being by herself. She wasn't rich, but she had peace, and that was enough for her. One morning, while preparing breakfast, she felt dizzy. The room spun slightly, and she had to hold the table to keep herself from falling. She thought it was just because she hadn't eaten properly, so she ignored it and went to work. But the dizziness didn't stop. It came every day, followed by nausea and tiredness that wouldn't go away. She started losing her appetite, and her clothes began to feel tighter around her waist. At first, she didn't think much of it. She told herself it could be stress or a weak stomach. But when weeks passed and her condition didn't improve, she decided to visit the town's small clinic. The clinic was run by an older doctor who had treated her family for years. He greeted her kindly and asked what was wrong. She explained her symptoms, and he listened carefully before suggesting a few routine tests. The next day, she returned for the results, expecting to hear something about low blood pressure or a vitamin issue. But when the doctor looked at the report, his expression changed. He glanced at her, then back at the paper, as if unsure how to say what he had to say. Finally, he looked up and said quietly, "You're pregnant." She laughed nervously at first, thinking he was joking, but the doctor was serious. He showed her the test results that clearly confirmed it. She felt her heart drop. That couldn't be possible. She hadn't been in a relationship for over a year. She told the doctor that, insisting there must be a mistake. He ran another test, but the result was the same. She sat there in silence, not knowing what to feel. The doctor spoke gently, saying sometimes test errors happen, but this seemed accurate. He recommended an ultrasound in the coming weeks to confirm the pregnancy. She walked out of the clinic in a daze, holding the report in her trembling hands. The world around her looked the same, but everything inside her had changed. That night she couldn't sleep. She kept staring at the ceiling, replaying the doctor's words again and again. Pregnant, how could that be? She thought of every possibility. Maybe some medical condition mimicked pregnancy symptoms, or maybe it was some rare hormonal problem. But deep down, she felt something strange was happening, something she couldn't explain. Over the next few days, she tried to hide her confusion and act normal. But the news spread quickly in the small town. Someone had seen her leaving the clinic, and soon everyone was whispering. Some said she was expecting. Others added their own stories. She felt their eyes on her whenever she stepped outside. People who once greeted her warmly now looked at her with curiosity or judgment. She started avoiding the marketplace and took longer routes to work. One afternoon, her neighbor knocked on the door to bring her soup. She smiled politely, but the woman's eyes lingered on her stomach before she left. As soon as the door closed, she sighed and sat down, feeling completely alone. She wanted to tell someone the truth, that she didn't know how it happened, that she was scared. But she knew no one would believe her. Weeks passed, and her body started to change. Her belly grew little by little. She could feel soft movements inside her, faint at first but gradually stronger. Each time it happened, she froze, her hand resting on her stomach. It was real. Whatever was growing inside her was alive, and strangely, despite her fear, she began to feel a connection to it. She talked softly to her belly when she was alone, telling it about her day, her worries, and how everyone in town was talking about them. It was the only thing that listened quietly. When she went for her first ultrasound, the doctor looked puzzled. The monitor showed something, but not clearly. He frowned, adjusting the machine, moving the probe around, trying to get a better image. Finally, he said he'd like to refer her to a specialist in the city. He didn't say much more, but his face said enough. Something didn't look normal. She left the hospital with mixed feelings. Fear crept deeper into her heart. But there was also curiosity. What if this was something rare? Something no one had ever seen before? That night she had a strange dream. She saw herself lying in a hospital bed, surrounded by doctors and bright lights. Everyone was staring at her in silence. She tried to speak, but no sound came out. When she looked down, her stomach was glowing faintly, as if light was shining from within. She woke up sweating, her heart racing. The dream felt too real to ignore. The following morning, she stood in front of the mirror and touched her stomach again. She whispered, "What are you?" Her reflection looked tired, pale, but determined. No matter what people said, she was going to protect whatever was inside her. Months passed, The baby, or whatever it was, continued to grow. Her health stayed surprisingly stable. She ate well, slept when she could, and avoided unnecessary stress. Still, she couldn't ignore the strange sensations she sometimes felt. There were nights when she'd wake up to a faint humming sound in her room, like a vibration coming from her belly. Once she thought she saw her skin move in patterns, almost like waves. She told herself she was imagining things, but a small part of her knew something about this pregnancy was different. She began keeping a small diary, writing down everything she experienced. The entries filled with notes about the sounds, the dreams, and how her baby seemed to react to certain things, like light or music. When she played soft songs, she felt calm movements. But when the TV made sudden noises, the movement turned sharp and quick, almost as if it were reacting with fear. Her family, who lived in another town, didn't visit much. She didn't tell them the full truth, only that she was expecting and didn't want to talk about it. They didn't ask many questions. Still, sometimes she wondered what they'd think if they knew the whole story. One afternoon, she went for a walk near the edge of town. The fields stretched wide and golden, and the wind carried the smell of rain. She sat under a tree and closed her eyes. For the first time in a long while, she felt at peace. She placed her hand on her belly and smiled faintly. "Maybe you're just special," she whispered. Maybe that's all. But peace never lasted long. When she went back for another checkup, the same doctor looked uneasy again. He said the growth rate was faster than usual. The fetus seemed larger than expected for the months past. He asked if she had taken any medication or had any strange symptoms. She said no, but she could see from his face that he didn't believe her completely. On her way home, rain started to fall heavily. She ran, trying to cover her belly with her coat, but slipped on the muddy path. For a moment, she thought she felt something shift inside her, like a strong pulse. She gasped, holding her stomach tightly, then slowly stood up. There was no pain, just that rhythmic movement again, strong and steady. She took a deep breath and continued home, drenched but strangely calm. The following days went by quietly. She kept to herself, only visiting the doctor when necessary. Her co-workers noticed she looked different, tired but glowing in a strange way. Some even started treating her with odd respect, as if afraid of her. One whispered that her pregnancy was not normal, that maybe she had been chosen for something. She tried not to listen, but their words stayed in her mind. Late one evening, she sat near her window, watching lightning flash in the distance. She felt the baby, or whatever was inside, move again, stronger than ever before. She pressed her hand over the spot, and for a brief second it felt like something inside pushed back gently, as if answering her touch. She smiled through tears. Despite the fear, the confusion, and the loneliness, she loved it deeply. Still, a small voice inside her whispered that something was waiting ahead, something that would change her life completely. She didn't know it yet, but the night she would give birth would also be the night the police got called, and her quiet life would never be the same again. The months went by, and the pregnancy continued to grow in strange ways. It wasn't just her body that was changing, but everything around her seemed to shift too. She noticed little things at first, the way the air in her room felt heavier, or how animals near her house acted restless. Dogs barked when she passed by. Birds stopped singing when she walked under a tree. It was small, but she could feel that the world was reacting to her somehow. She tried to ignore these things, focusing instead on staying healthy. Every morning she made tea, took her vitamins, and went for a short walk. People in the town had started keeping their distance. Some didn't even greet her anymore. She could feel their stares from across the street, and sometimes she overheard whispers about her pregnancy being unnatural. It hurt her deeply, but she pretended not to care. She told herself that people always talk about what they don't understand. The baby, or what she thought was a baby, moved a lot now. The movements were different, though. They weren't soft kicks like the ones she had read about in pregnancy books. These felt sharp sometimes and in odd places. Once she woke up in the middle of the night because she felt something press against her ribs from the inside. It wasn't painful, but it felt too strong, too coordinated, like it wasn't random movement at all, almost like it was aware of what it was doing. She tried telling her doctor about it during her monthly checkup, but he only smiled politely and said, "Some babies move more than others." His calm tone didn't convince her. She could tell he didn't believe what he was saying. He took extra time checking her that day, running the ultrasound machine again and again, trying to get a clear image. But as before, the picture was blurry. It showed a form, but the shape was hard to define. He told her the machine might be faulty and asked her to come back another day. When she left the clinic, she felt uneasy. The wind outside was cold, though it wasn't winter yet. She pulled her scarf tighter and walked home, her mind racing. Every time the baby moved, her heart raced a little too. It wasn't fear anymore, it was confusion mixed with a strange kind of awe. Whatever was inside her felt alive, yes, but also different. That night she dreamed again. She was lying in a hospital bed surrounded by people in masks. Their faces were hidden and the lights above her were bright. She couldn't move, but she could hear whispers all around her. One voice said softly, "It's not human." Another replied, "Keep quiet." Then she felt something warm on her stomach, like a heartbeat that wasn't hers. When she opened her eyes in the dream, she saw her belly glowing faintly again, the same way it had in her previous dream. Then everything went dark. She woke up sweating, her hands gripping the blanket tightly. Her heart pounded, and her stomach felt warm, just like in the dream. She sat up slowly and looked down. There was nothing unusual, no light, no glow, but the baby was moving again. It was awake, just like her. The days after that became harder. Her back ached, her legs swelled, and she could barely sleep. But it wasn't the physical pain that bothered her most. It was the feeling that she wasn't alone, even when she was. Sometimes when she was cooking or reading, she felt eyes on her. Once she caught herself turning around suddenly, thinking someone had called her name, but no one was there. Even the air seemed to carry a strange hum at times, faint but constant. She started writing more often in her diary. The pages filled with thoughts she couldn't tell anyone, how her belly sometimes vibrated like a phone, or how the baby moved more when it rained. She wrote about how she started hearing faint sounds at night, almost like a heartbeat echoing through the walls. At first she thought it was her imagination, but she recorded one on her phone once. When she played it back, the sound was real, a low rhythmic thump that didn't match her own heartbeat. She deleted it right away, too afraid to keep it. The next appointment with the doctor brought even more confusion. He was quiet through most of the checkup, frowning at the monitor. Finally, he asked if she had noticed anything strange. She hesitated, then nodded. He said he wanted to send her to a bigger hospital in the city for better testing. He didn't say why, but she could sense worry behind his professional calm. She agreed, though she didn't have much money for travel. Before she could go, something happened that made her hesitate. One morning she woke up to a sharp movement inside her, so strong that it made her gasp. She looked down and saw a visible ripple move across her stomach from one side to the other. It didn't look natural. It was as if something inside was shifting deliberately. Her first reaction was fear, but it quickly turned into silence. She just sat there staring at herself, unable to believe what she saw. Later that day, she felt lightheaded and decided to rest. As she closed her eyes, she thought she heard a faint sound like soft murmuring right next to her ear. The sound didn't come from outside. It was coming from within her. She froze, her breath caught in her throat. It lasted only a few seconds, but it was enough to leave her shaken. When it stopped, she opened her eyes and whispered, "Please stop." She didn't know who she was talking to. Her friend from work came by to check on her that evening. They sat together for a while drinking tea. Her friend tried to cheer her up, saying everything would be fine, that babies sometimes behave strangely before birth. But when she mentioned that the baby didn't look clear on the ultrasound, her friend's face changed. "Maybe you should see someone in the city," she said quietly. "There are better doctors there." She nodded, though deep down she knew that even the best doctor might not have an explanation for this. Over the next few weeks, her belly grew much faster. People noticed. Some even stopped her on the street asking how far along she was. When she told them, they looked surprised. It didn't match the size. Others avoided her completely. The whispers became louder. Someone spread a rumor that she was cursed. Another said she had done something forbidden. She tried to ignore it, but every word sank deep into her heart. She avoided going out after sunset and kept her curtains closed most of the time. One evening, while folding baby clothes she had bought weeks earlier, she felt something strange again. The baby moved, but this time it felt coordinated. Not like kicking, but as if it were trying to communicate. She froze, waiting. It happened again. A soft pulse under her skin, then another, almost like a pattern. She placed her hand there and whispered, "Are you trying to tell me something?" The movement stopped and she was left in silence. Her heart beat faster as she sat there staring into the dim light of her room. The next day, she went back to the clinic hoping for answers. The doctor met her with a serious face. He said he had sent her test results to a colleague in the city. The reply came back with one word: unusual. When she asked what that meant, he didn't answer right away. Finally, he said, "It might be a rare condition, something that hasn't been documented before." She asked if the baby was healthy. He hesitated again, then nodded slowly. "We'll have to wait and see." That night she couldn't sleep. She kept hearing rain tapping against her window and the same soft hum in her belly. The dream came back again, this time clearer. She saw herself holding a small bundle in her arms, but when she tried to look at it, the lights in the room flickered and went out. She woke up gasping, her body covered in sweat. She sat up and placed her hand on her stomach. The movement inside was steady, slow, almost comforting now. "You'll be okay," she whispered, though she wasn't sure who she was trying to comfort, herself or the life growing inside her. The next few weeks passed quietly but uneasily. She spent most of her time indoors, reading or sewing small clothes. Every now and then she would go to the window and look outside. The sky always seemed heavier these days, as if it too was waiting for something. Her belly felt tight and heavy, and the baby's movements grew stronger. Sometimes she thought she could even feel faint heat from inside. The due date was still some time away, but she could sense that things were happening faster than expected. One stormy evening, she felt the first signs that labor might be near. The air in her room was thick and every sound felt louder. She packed a small bag and sat on the edge of her bed, breathing slowly. Outside, thunder rolled across the dark sky. She didn't know what was coming, but she could feel it would be something no one had ever seen before. And when the pain finally began, she reached for her phone and called the hospital. Her voice shook as she said, "It's happening." She didn't know that the night she would give birth would not only shock the doctors but would also bring the police to her door. The storm outside grew worse as the night went on. Rain hit the windows hard and thunder rolled through the sky. Inside her small home, she paced back and forth, holding her stomach and trying to stay calm. The pain had started hours ago, coming and going like waves. She knew the time had come. Every few minutes she bent forward, breathing heavily, her hands gripping the edge of the table for support. She had already called the hospital, and an ambulance was on its way. The power flickered several times, and for a moment the lights went out completely. Only the sound of rain and her quick breathing filled the room. She whispered softly to herself, "It's okay. It's going to be okay." When the ambulance arrived, 2 paramedics helped her onto a stretcher and covered her with a blanket. The air outside was cold and the wind blew hard, but she barely felt it. Her mind was spinning with pain and fear. One of the paramedics tried to keep her calm, saying they would reach the hospital soon. She nodded weakly, clutching her stomach. The ride felt endless. Every bump on the road made her wince. She could feel the baby, or whatever it was, moving strongly inside her. It wasn't like before. The movement felt too powerful, too deliberate. She closed her eyes tightly and whispered, "Please, just let this end." When they finally reached the hospital, the nurses rushed her inside. The storm raged outside, lightning flashing across the windows as they wheeled her down the hallway. The doctor she'd been seeing was already waiting, along with a small team. They moved quickly, preparing everything for delivery. The room smelled of disinfectant. Machines beeped quietly in the background. She lay on the bed, gripping the sheets tightly as another wave of pain came. A nurse wiped her forehead and spoke gently. "You're doing fine. Just breathe." The doctor gave her a reassuring nod, but his eyes betrayed worry. He had delivered many babies in his career, but something about this case made him uneasy. He had seen her test results, her ultrasounds that never showed clear images, and now seeing her trembling in pain, he couldn't shake the feeling that something unusual was about to happen. As the contractions grew stronger, her breathing became fast and shallow. The doctor told her to push when the time came. She did as instructed, her whole body shaking. The nurses encouraged her softly, but soon their faces began to change. One nurse gasped quietly, covering her mouth. Another stepped back, her eyes wide. The doctor leaned forward to look closely, and his expression froze. What he saw was not what he expected. Something about the shape didn't seem right. He tried to keep calm, not wanting to frighten the woman. He spoke softly, telling her to keep breathing. But when the next contraction came, she screamed. Not from normal pain, but from confusion and fear. She could feel something different, something she couldn't explain. Her heart raced. "What's happening?" she cried. The doctor didn't answer immediately. He motioned to the nurses to stay calm and continue assisting. "You're doing fine," he said in a steady voice, though his hands trembled slightly. He could see that this was no ordinary delivery. Minutes passed like hours. The tension in the room grew heavier with each second. The beeping of the monitor echoed loudly in the small space. The storm outside grew louder too, as if nature itself was reacting to what was happening inside. Finally, after one last push, the room went silent. The woman collapsed back onto the bed, breathing heavily, sweat running down her face. The doctor gently lifted what had come out and placed it on the table beside him. It was wrapped in a thick wax-like membrane covered in fluid. It didn't look like a baby at first glance. Everyone in the room stared in silence. The nurses exchanged nervous glances, unsure of what to do. The doctor carefully picked up a pair of scissors and began cutting through the membrane. His hands moved slowly, his face pale. When the outer layer finally peeled away, a collective gasp filled the room. Inside the wrapping was something small, curled up and still. For a brief moment, no one moved. Then suddenly it took a shallow breath. The doctor froze. Whatever it was alive. One of the nurses stepped back, her hand over her mouth. Another whispered, "What is that?" The doctor didn't answer. He stared at it for a long time before finally covering it with a white cloth. Then he turned to the nurses and said firmly, "Everyone stay here. Do not touch anything. I need to make a call." He walked out of the room quickly, his footsteps echoing down the hallway. The woman on the bed looked around weakly, her voice trembling. "Is my baby okay?" No one answered right away. The nurse closest to her tried to smile but couldn't hide the fear in her eyes. "Just rest, please," she said softly. "The doctor will be back soon." The doctor went straight to his office and picked up the phone with shaking hands. He called the hospital director first, then the police. His voice was steady but urgent as he said, "You need to send someone immediately. We've had an unusual birth. This isn't normal." Back in the room, the woman could hear faint voices outside. She looked toward the table, trying to see her baby, but one of the nurses gently stopped her. "Please don't move yet," she said. "You need to rest." The woman's mind was spinning. She couldn't understand what was happening. She had felt the life inside her for months, talked to it, waited for this moment. And now no one would tell her what she had given birth to. Her heart ached with confusion and fear. After a few minutes, the doctor returned with 2 officers. They spoke quietly near the door, their faces serious. One of them looked toward the covered table and then at the woman lying on the bed. She tried to sit up, but the nurse gently pushed her back down. "Why are the police here?" she asked weakly. "Where's my baby?" The doctor took a deep breath before answering. "You need to stay calm," he said gently. "There's something unusual about what we delivered. We just need to make sure everything is safe." "Safe?" she repeated. "What do you mean, safe?" "It's my baby." Tears filled her eyes. She tried to reach out toward the table, but the nurse held her hand firmly. "Please," the nurse whispered, "just rest. Everything will be okay." The doctor and police spoke again quietly, and then the officers left to make phone calls. The strange stillness in the room made her feel trapped. The sounds of thunder and rain mixed with the quiet hum of hospital machines. Minutes later, a group of people in white coats entered. Medical examiners, specialists from another department. They gathered around the table, whispering to each other. One of them lifted the cloth carefully. The woman caught a glimpse of what was underneath and gasped. It looked small and pale, but its features were unclear from where she lay. She could only see its faint movements, small but definite. She turned to the doctor again, her voice breaking. "Please tell me, is it alive?" He nodded slowly. "Yes," he said softly. "It's breathing." She closed her eyes, tears rolling down her face. Relief mixed with fear. "Then why won't you let me see it?" she whispered. The doctor didn't reply. He only said, "We just need to understand what's happening first." Outside, she could hear more footsteps. More people had arrived. The hospital had become unusually busy for the hour. She could sense the nervousness in everyone's movements. As time passed, exhaustion took over. Her body was weak and her eyes began to close. Before she drifted off to sleep, she heard one of the specialists whisper something to the doctor. She couldn't make out the full sentence, only one part of it. "This shouldn't be possible." When she woke up hours later, the room was empty. The storm had passed, and sunlight peeked faintly through the curtains. Her first thought was of the baby. She looked around, but the table where it had been was gone. Panic filled her chest. She pressed the call button beside the bed until a nurse came rushing in. "Where's my baby?" she asked, her voice trembling. The nurse hesitated. "The doctor will explain everything," she said, avoiding her eyes. "Please tell me," she begged. The nurse looked torn, then whispered, "They took it for more tests. The police were here all night." The woman's heart sank. "The police? Why?" "It's just a baby." The nurse didn't answer. She simply adjusted the blanket and said softly, "Try to rest." Then she left the room quietly. The woman lay there, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing. She had carried that life inside her for months. She had felt its movements, its heartbeat, its presence. And now it was gone, taken away by people who wouldn't even call it a baby. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she whispered to herself, "Whatever you are, you're mine." Outside her room, the doctor stood in the hallway speaking with the police again. He looked tired and pale. One of the officers asked, "What exactly did you see?" The doctor paused, his eyes distant. "I don't know," he said quietly. "But whatever it was alive. And it looked back at me." Morning light crept slowly into the hospital room, falling softly across the bed where she lay awake. Her eyes were open, but she hadn't slept at all. The night before kept replaying in her mind like a loop she couldn't stop. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw flashes of it. The bright lights, the nurses' frightened faces, the doctor's trembling hands, and the sound of something breathing that wasn't her. She turned her head toward the window. The storm had passed, leaving behind a gray sky and quiet streets. The world outside looked normal again, but inside the hospital everything had changed. She could hear muffled voices in the hallway. People were walking back and forth, but no one came inside her room. She didn't know if they were avoiding her or if they simply didn't know what to say. She wanted answers, but every time she tried asking, the nurses only said, "The doctor will explain everything soon." Soon never came. By afternoon, a police officer entered her room. He was polite but distant, holding a small notebook in his hand. "We just need to ask you a few questions," he said. His tone was calm, but she could tell he was being careful. She nodded weakly. "Is my baby okay?" He hesitated before answering. "The doctors are examining what was delivered," he said slowly. "We're still waiting for an official report." "What was delivered?" She repeated, confused. "It's a baby. I gave birth to a baby." He looked uncomfortable. "Yes. We just need to make sure everything is safe." "Safe from what?" she asked, her voice trembling. He didn't respond directly. He just asked her questions. Where she lived, what she ate, if she had traveled recently, if anyone had visited her in the months before. His questions made her feel like she was being investigated, not helped. "I'm not sick," she said firmly. "I didn't do anything wrong." The officer closed his notebook. "We understand," he said softly. "This is just procedure." Then he thanked her and left. When the door closed, she broke down. She pulled the blanket over her face and cried quietly. She had imagined her first moment with her child so many times, holding it close, hearing its cry, feeling its warmth. Instead, she was lying alone, treated like a suspect in her own story. Later that evening, the doctor came in. His eyes looked tired and his shoulders were tense. He sat by her bed and spoke in a gentle voice. "You need to rest. Your body has been through a lot." She ignored that. "Where's my baby?" she asked again. He hesitated. "It's under observation," he said. "Observation?" she whispered. "What does that even mean?" He sighed, looking down at his hands. "There are irregularities. The medical team and authorities are reviewing the situation. For now, it's better that you recover here." She stared at him, her voice small but sharp. "You make it sound like I did something wrong." "No," he said quickly. "Not at all. You didn't, but the case is unusual. We just need to understand it better." "Can I see it?" she asked. He looked at her for a long time, then shook his head slowly. "Not yet," her chest tightened. "Please, I carried it for months. I have a right to see it." "I'm sorry," he said softly. "There are rules I have to follow." Then he stood up and left the room, leaving her staring at the door long after he was gone. That night, she couldn't sleep again. Every sound made her jump. The beeping of machines, footsteps in the corridor, whispers from nurses. At one point, she thought she heard crying from another room, faint but clear. She pressed the call button and a nurse came in. "Did you hear that?" she asked. The nurse looked confused. "Hear what?" "The crying. It sounded like a baby." The nurse shook her head. "There are no newborns in this ward," she said. "But I heard it," she insisted. The nurse smiled politely. "You're just tired. Try to get some rest." When the nurse left, the woman lay back, her eyes wide open. The crying had stopped, but the silence that followed was even louder. The next morning, 2 men in dark suits visited her. They introduced themselves as officials from a medical investigation unit. They spoke calmly, but their questions were more detailed than before. They asked about her medical history, her diet, her blood type, and even her parents' health. One of them asked, "Have you ever participated in any kind of experiment?" She frowned. "What kind of question is that?" "Of course not." The man nodded without emotion and wrote something down. Then they thanked her and left, saying they might need to speak again later. After they were gone, she sat quietly for a long time. Every part of her felt heavy. She didn't know what they were looking for, but it was clear that her life had changed in ways she couldn't control. In the following days, she overheard bits of conversation from the nurses and staff. Words like classified, lab team, and containment floated through the air. Once she caught sight of a man in a lab coat carrying a sealed container down the hallway. He avoided her gaze. She started feeling trapped. The hospital didn't let her leave yet, saying she needed observation. Her phone had been taken for evidence. She wasn't allowed visitors. She was completely alone. Each night she had the same dream, bright lights, whispering voices, and something small reaching out toward her. She always woke up gasping for air. Sometimes she thought she could still feel movement inside her, even though she had already given birth. On the 4th night, she woke suddenly to the sound of someone arguing outside her door. She recognized the doctor's voice. "She has the right to know," he said firmly. A second voice, deeper and calmer, replied, "This is not a normal medical case anymore. You've seen the report." "I've seen a mother," the doctor snapped. "She's not a criminal. She deserves answers." The conversation went silent for a moment, and then footsteps faded down the hallway. The woman lay still, her heart racing. She had never heard the doctor sound that angry before. The next morning, he came into her room quietly. He looked like he hadn't slept either. He handed her a glass of water and said softly, "They're transferring it to another facility today." Her heart sank. "What do you mean, transferring?" He looked at her sadly. "They're taking it to a secure research center for further study." "No," she whispered. "You can't let them do that. It's my baby." He hesitated, then said, "It's alive. That's all I can tell you. But I don't think they'll let anyone near it now." Tears filled her eyes. "Please, I just want to hold it once." Just once. He looked torn. Finally, he said quietly, "I'll try." Hours passed. Nurses came and went, avoiding her gaze. By afternoon, she heard footsteps again, many of them. She peeked through the small window in her door and saw men in white suits carrying something inside a covered box. A van waited outside. The doctor stood nearby, arguing again with one of the men, but in the end, he stepped back helplessly. She pressed her forehead against the glass, her tears blurring her vision. The box disappeared into the van. Then the doors closed and the vehicle drove away. When the doctor came in later, she didn't speak. She just stared at him. He sat down beside her and said softly, "They won't tell me where they're taking it." "I'm sorry." She nodded slowly, her eyes empty. "Do you believe it was human?" she asked. He hesitated for a long time. Then he said quietly, "It was alive." "That's what I know." "And it looked at me." "That's something I'll never forget." After that day, things in the hospital returned to normal for everyone, except her. Within a week, she was discharged. They said she was physically fine, though they wanted her to come for follow-ups. She walked out of the hospital with an empty heart and a file of medical papers she didn't understand. Outside, the air was fresh and quiet. She took a deep breath and looked up at the pale sky. The world moved on as if nothing had happened. But she knew nothing would ever be the same again. When she reached home, the house felt colder than before. Everything was in its place, but it no longer felt like her home. She walked to her bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed. staring at the small baby blanket she had folded weeks ago. Her hands trembled as she touched it. That night, as the town grew silent, she heard something faint, a soft rhythmic sound, almost like a heartbeat. It wasn't loud, just a gentle pulse in the air. She froze, her eyes wide. It came from somewhere nearby, but she couldn't tell where. Then it stopped. She whispered to herself, "You're still here, aren't you?" No one answered, but deep down she felt a strange calm. Whatever had happened, whatever they had taken from her, she knew a part of it still connected to her. She could feel it, not with her hands, but somewhere deep inside her heart. The next morning, she found a small mark on her wrist that hadn't been there before, light, almost invisible, like a faint shape. She stared at it for a long time. Somehow she knew it wasn't random. It was a reminder. The police might have taken her child away. The doctors might have called it an anomaly. But to her it was still her baby. And she promised herself that one day she would find out the truth about what she had brought into the world. After the baby, or whatever it had been, was taken away, her life felt empty. The house she had once loved now seemed too quiet. Every room echoed with memories she couldn't shake. The first flutter of movement she had felt, the soft pressure of little kicks, and the warmth she had imagined in her arms. She couldn't eat properly, sleep properly, or even go outside without feeling eyes on her. Though no one said anything, she could sense the town's whispers, people wondering what had happened, people trying to make sense of what no one would explain. She tried to return to normal life, but normal didn't exist anymore. Work became a blur. Her co-workers, who had once greeted her cheerfully, now avoided her entirely. She didn't blame them. She could still feel the tension of those nights in the hospital, the strange whispers in the corridors, and the hurried steps of doctors who refused to explain anything. Everything about her pregnancy, her labor, and the delivery had become a story that no one dared to tell. One day, a nurse who had been present the night of the birth came to her quietly. She didn't introduce herself, and she spoke in a whisper, almost afraid someone would overhear. "I saw it," she said. "The baby. It was alive." It opened its eyes. The woman's heart stopped. "You mean—" "It looked at you?" The nurse nodded, her face pale. "It was human. It had all the features of a newborn, but there was something different. Something I can't explain. The way it looked at everyone, it was like it knew who we were. It was calm but aware." Tears filled the woman's eyes. "They told me it was just an anomaly, that I wouldn't be able to see it again." The nurse shook her head. "You're not lying. You know it, and it remembers you. I saw it respond when you spoke before they took it. That connection, it's real." Her mind swirled with a mix of fear and hope. She had imagined this moment 1,000 times, and now someone confirmed that her instincts had been right. Whatever had been inside her wasn't ordinary. Whatever had been taken away was still connected to her. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months. She tried to focus on work, but her thoughts always returned to the baby. She started walking again, wandering along empty streets and quiet fields, hoping for a sign, anything to tell her it was safe. She avoided friends and family, too afraid to talk about it. No one would understand, and some might think she had lost her mind. One night, while she sat alone on the porch, she noticed something strange on her wrist. A small, faint mark that hadn't been there before. It was almost like a shadow of a shape, delicate but distinct. She pressed her fingers to it, and for a moment a shiver ran through her body. Somehow she knew this mark wasn't random. It was a message, a reminder, a connection that remained despite the distance and secrecy. She kept it hidden from everyone. She didn't want to explain, and she didn't want anyone to question her sanity. Every time she looked at it, she thought of the baby, and a mix of sorrow and determination filled her heart. She knew she had to find out the truth someday, no matter how long it took.